start with the end customer in mind, figure out who your end customer is going to be, and go start lining those people up. Okay, because at the end of the day, that's who you have to satisfy. And so whatever the business deal is, just figure out where the end customer is going to be, and make sure that through letters of intent or something like that, that you get those relationships in place. And if you do that, you're going to be okay.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Eric Johnson. And Eric, in his own words, was a very average high school and college student. So, but always wanted to be an attorney, but didn't think he was smart enough to do so. So for a while, went into work instead as a housekeeper at a hospital, I believe. And then one of his friends, I think that is working with the hospital, got into law school, and he decided, hey, I'll give it a try. How hard could it be? If my friend could do it, so could I. Applied to several law schools, got rejected by them all. So his initial instinct was at least initially correct, but he then spent another year improving his odds, reapplied, got on a wait list, and was the last person off of the wait list to get into law school. Ended up getting great grades and being #1 in his class. So went from wait list to #1. Wrote a book about that experience, going from worst to first. Also graduated, clerked at the Utah Supreme Court, worked as a litigator, worked for other firms over the period of about 10 years, decided he didn't like how, and I'm much the same way, decided how he didn't like how some of the other firms were doing it. So eventually opened up his own practice, built that with a partner, and now specializes in public and private partnerships with the government and industry. So with that much as introduction, welcome on the podcast, Eric.
Hey, glad to be here, Devin.
Glad to have you on. Excited to have a great conversation. So with that, I gave the shorter condensed version, the 45-second or 30-second or however long it was, version of a much longer journey. But why don't you take us back a bit in time to when you were quote unquote an average high school and college student, and how your journey got started there.
Well, I'm absolutely an average guy. Even my name's average, Eric Johnson. I just always got average results. I was one of those guys who, politely clapped and applauded when other people got awards that I wished I had. That was me pretty consistently. And, that was all the way through growing up. That was all the way through college and even after college. And, was I happy being average? Hey, I always wanted to be more than average, right? Who doesn't? And
I don't know. I'm always waiting, just as a complete, I'm always waiting for that, because you got to figure there's only one person that's actually average, because everybody's either above average or everybody's below average. So I'm always wanting to meet that person that is exactly in the middle.
Well, I was pretty close, pretty dang close, pretty much all the time.
All right.
And anyway, like you pointed out, I had a friend who, I was 5 years out of college. I was working as a housekeeper in a hospital, and I had a friend.
One just real quick question on that, because you jumped on to college. So what did you study in college? So if you'd always kind of wanted to be an attorney but didn't quite go that route, at least not initially, what did you study in college before you went to work at the hospital?
My undergraduate degree is called Physical Plant Administration, which is a fairly unique degree.
All right.
In which I studied to, maintain and take care of physical assets of companies, of businesses. And so that's what I was doing. I was working in housekeeping at a hospital. I'm one of the few people who actually trained to do that. And so that's what I was doing. And I had a friend say he got into law school, and I was green with envy, but of course congratulated him heartily, and thought, well, I never actually applied to law school, so why accept a rejection that was never made, right? And so I went and took the law school admissions test, the LSAT, and did well enough. I thought, well, I'll apply to some law schools. I'll give it a try. And they all agreed with me. I didn't have the grades. I just wasn't smart enough to get in. And so
Now you do that. So, first of all, I get it. And, first of all, it's not an enjoyable process to go and apply to law schools. You got to take the LSAT, you have to do studying, you have to do all of that. And then you have to wait for a while. And it's not an enjoyable experience in that sense, but you say, okay, didn't get in the first time. Couple of questions on that, and I guess I'll break them up. But what did you do in the meantime? Because I know you mentioned you kind of worked to get your odds up or to get you in a better place to reapply. But did you continue to work at the hospital that time? Did you take a break and say, I'm going to do this as my sole focus, or what did you do for that period of time?
yeah, no, I continued working at the hospital. I got hold of the admissions officers of the law schools that had turned me down and just said, I can't change my grades. Is there something else I can do to improve my application package? And they were all very kind and generous with their time and gave me some pointers. And so, yeah, I worked over that year and kind of polished up my resume, so to speak, to kind of tweak it the way law schools want to see it. And then I applied again that next year. And, I will say this, there was absolutely nothing that suggested to me that I should pursue going to law school. Okay. The only factor in favor of me going to law school was it's what I wanted to do. Every other factor cut against it. But I decided, you know what? I'm going to give it another go to see if I can get in. And the day I graduated from law school, my wife told me, she said, the only reason I said you could go to law school was because I knew you couldn't get in, and I figured it's better someone else tell you no than me, right? So,
Hey, you proved you're wrong. It took you a bit of time, but you got in. So that is funny. And my wife's probably the same way. He's like, you'll never go for 4 degrees. We'll just let you or continue to pretend it. And then I got him. She's like, well, okay, I guess you did it. So you finally reworked, kind of looked and said, what can I do to improve? How can I improve my chances and my odds? You apply, you get waitlisted, last one to be accepted off the wait list, and then you go and do well in law school. And so, that in and of itself is kudos to you. But now you come out of law school, and I think you also wrote a book about it. But what did you do as you now finally get into law school, prove everybody or prove your wife wrong, at least go and get the degree, and then coming out? How did the journey go from there?
well, anytime you level up, anytime you just make a jump from where you are to, where you always wanted to be, right? Where you always dreamed of being. As a matter of fact, I leveled up so high, I never even dreamed of being top of my class in law school. At most, I thought, hey, if I can just not be last, wouldn't that be awesome? Okay. I mean, because I knew I started dead last, very last in my class. And so, there's a real emotional fortitude that is required to make that transition. And that's really what I try and capture in my book that I wrote about it, called Worst to First. And just to try to help people understand, because the whole time you're doubting yourself, right? The whole time you're going, I'm just an average guy, I can't do this. Yet at the same time, you're trying to do it anyway. And, that's really the way it is for every entrepreneur. They're trying to do something they've never done before. They're trying to go from where they've been to where they want to be. And while they have some ideas about how to do that, they've just never done it. They don't really know how. And it's a matter of cracking that nut, of trying to figure it out on the fly And that's it's a rush when it finally happens.
No, and I agree with you. And, I think there's a lot to it now. I mean, I came in a bit differently, but I came in from an engineering background. And so I did electrical engineering and Chinese as my undergraduate, but with an emphasis on electrical engineering. I came into law school and it was a much different mindset as to how the professors want you to write things and how you take tests and everything else. And so didn't start out last, but I definitely get the having or going in there with a bit of having to have fortitude to take it. And the first year I did fine, but the second and third year, once you get it figured out, I went to or did considerably better just because you're having to figure out how to do that. So I get a lot of that fortitude. Now, on the other hand, if you're starting at last place, you really can't go any lower. So it does give you the opportunity to say, all I can do is move upward and all I can do is do better. And now let's make it happen. So I think that's a great story to have. So now as you're coming out of law school, you wrote the book, shared the experience. Now you started clerking for the Utah Supreme Court. Is that where you got started?
Yeah, my first full-time job out of law school was clerking at the Utah Supreme Court, kind of the spoils of doing as well as I did. And then did some commercial litigation at some of the high-powered litigation firms, and worked at a large national firm. And after doing that for a number of years, it was just like, you know what, I got to take off the handcuffs. And it's hard because they're kind of golden handcuffs. They pay you well, but at the same time they hold you back in other ways. It's certainly much more difficult to build a business in the practice of law within a large law firm than it is out on your own, because there's some inherent restrictions within the large law firm.
No, and I'd agree with that. And just now you're playing into doing a little bit of the same reason. I went and built my own law firm as well. But just out of curiosity, kind of what were those restrictions, or kind of what was it feeling? What were the things that kind of felt like they were holding you back or weren't jiving with what you were looking to accomplish?
Sure. First of all, when you're with a major law firm, their billing rates are high. And when you're just starting out your practice, one of the arrows you want in your quiver is to be able to say to someone, you know what, if you take a chance on me, I'll give you a real discount. At the large law firm, you can't do that. They won't allow you.
Yeah.
Another thing is large law firms are built to support very senior attorneys that already have established client bases.
Mm-hmm.
And they're more interested in the junior attorneys helping them and carrying their briefcase than they are in those junior attorneys building up their own client base, right?
No,
Because
and I definitely agree with that. And there's a lot of truth to that. And in a sense, one, it is hard when they're billing you out for clients that are already well established, that are wanting to that are willing to accept the rates, especially if you're at a big law firm, and then to come in and say, okay, now oftentimes as a junior attorney, you're not able to go land those huge clients, and it takes a bit of time to build up a book of business and do that. Gives you a lot of handicap to not have much of that flexibility, as well as you're already servicing all those big clients, as you mentioned, that are billed for the partners already in the firm.
Yeah, not to mention they already want you to work 10, 12 hours a day on their clients. Where are you going to have time to go get your own and to work on your own clients, right? I mean, all of those are just kind of inherent, and they're not mean-spirited or anything like that. I mean, they're not trying to hold you down,
right?
But that's just the structure of it. And, I just got to the point where I kind of said, you know what, I'll go flip burgers rather than continue here.
Now, one thing I think we talked about along those lines is I think it took you a little while to get there, because I think you worked for several different firms along that realization that you're trying to find that firm that was right for you or that fit and couldn't quite find it. Is that about right?
Yeah, I was in-house counsel for a while with a large natural gas company, and was at a couple of different law firms for some unique reasons. And just really what I figured out is that in the private practice of law, having your own clients it doesn't matter anything else. You have to have your own clients in the private practice of law. And so I kind of got to that point where it's just like, okay, I got to get out of here. I got to get in a situation where I can be more of an entrepreneur.
No, and I agree with you. Some of the irony is that they really are wanting you to have your own. In order to succeed within the legal industry, you're having to build that book of business. You're having to actually go in, bring on those clients and do it. And then you said all those handicaps or those things that kind of handcuff you, and it makes it for a frustrating thing. So I certainly understand where you're coming from, and it mirrors a little bit of the same journey I took. I was a bit different. I was always saying, hey, I want to be able to pursue startups, small businesses, entrepreneurial things. And a lot of times the law firms, again, aren't necessarily set up for that. They're not looking for you to come up with different systems or different approaches or try things out or do things. They're really just looking for you to service your clients. And so I think that, a lot of times I think the lawyers, especially if you start your own firm, it's not always just, hey, I'm motivated by money. So that, just as you said, I'd rather go flip burgers, but you're saying, I want to do it my own way and have that freedom. This is not the environment that's going to set it up for me in the long run. And so now I've got to go figure that out. So no, now as you figure that out, and as you're saying, okay, I'm going to go, I'd rather flip burgers if I have to, but I'm going to go and figure out my own practice kind of, that's oftentimes a big leap for especially for attorneys, is because you're going from a law firm where you have business that is putting on your docket, you're having steady clientele, you're having, so to speak, a full docket, you're not having to worry about that, not to mention not having to worry about payroll and doing all the malpractice insurance and getting that all set up. Now you go do your own thing and you're having to deal with all those things. So how did that transition go for you as you decided, okay, I'm going to go start my own thing?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit like diving out off one of those high platforms into a kiddie pool, because you go from a fairly healthy paycheck that is there every month, and I had 0 clients, and I just walked out the door and said goodbye to all of to the paycheck. I had no clients whatsoever, and just kind of joined a group of attorneys who would let me hang out my shingle and build my own practice. And so that was you're kind of diving into that little pool and hoping it's going to work out okay.
No, I couldn't agree more. And it is always kind of that leap of faith, or you're not sure, especially if you're taking the leap without having client base, or ones that you're saying, hey, I can have some billing, or I know that I'll have some income. It's just a bit of that leap of faith. I think I can do it. I'm going to try it out and we'll see how it goes, type of a thing. And so, as you're doing that, how long did it take before you kind of started to figure out, area of law you're going to focus in, the client base, how you're going to do client generation, kind of what was that journey?
Yeah, so, I was able to build on the expertise that I had developed working with the big law firms. And so I at least had that. And I had looked up to see, okay, how long should I expect for me to build a full practice? And the different things that I read said, oh, it'll probably take 3 to 5 years to build your own practice. That's kind of an average time. And so that's what I was prepared to do, which kind of meant I was prepared to tighten my belt for a while, so to speak. And fortunately, everything worked out swimmingly. 6 months after I broke out on my own, I had a full slate of clients that were keeping me busy. Within the year, I had to hire a second attorney to help me. And that really was, spectacular, to the point that, I tell other people, don't expect that. That's rare. And if someone asks me what led to that, it's kind of like, I have to admit, I don't really know. Fortunately, I did have some contacts in industry from what I had been doing. I didn't have clients, but I had contacts, some relationships in industry. And basically what happened was there were a couple of folks who took a chance on me. It turned out really well. They told their friends, and it just went from there.
Oh, and I think I'd agree. I mean, that is certainly outside the norm of being able to ramp it up that quickly, get the firm established and be able to grow. So that's awesome that it was a great opportunity. It sounds like it was a great leap over and it was worthwhile. So, all right. Well, now that, as you've now gone out on your own, established your own firm, started to grow it, bringing on additional attorneys, where does that kind of put you at today? In other words, what, bringing your journey full circle to today, kind of where are things at? What are you working on, and what's the next steps for you? That what kind of what's the next 6 to 12 months or 12 months look like for you?
Well, I can tell you some of the things we're working on, and let me just start mentioning my audio book again, Worst to First. It was published with Nightingale Conant. Nightingale Conant, there's that's they've done audio programs with the likes of Earl Nightingale, Napoleon Hill, Zig Ziglar, Dr. Wayne Dyer, Dr. Deepak Chopra, just you name it. They have been the leader in motivational audio materials for more than half a century. And so I was just super excited when they picked up my book. It's available on Audible. It is an audio only product. There's not a written product, but just look it up under Worst to First. Eric Todd Johnson is the author, and you can find it there. And that's just been a lot of fun. I wrote it mostly just to kind of share my journey in case there were others that I might be able to help. And just from the publisher, you kind of gather the genre of what it is and the other authors that they work with. So my practice today is in public-private law, where I help governmental entities figure out what they can do to help private entities to build their businesses in ways that neither can do alone. There are some things that governments can do that they're really good at. There's a lot of things governments do that they're not so good at, but there's some things they're really good at. And if you focus on those things, they can really be a benefit to private enterprises. One of my clients just was able to get a railroad authorized by the U.S. Surface Transportation Board. That's the federal agency that regulates freight rail. We're told that it will be the longest greenfield railroad in the lower 48 states since World War II. And it'll be probably close to about a $2 billion project to get constructed and under operation. I'm working with another client. We are standing up a nuclear research lab that will be open access, meaning it will be open to both public and private entities that want to do advanced nuclear research. And that's just been a real blast, and just something fun to work on every day, where you're dealing with emerging technologies. And let me just, if you will indulge me for a minute, Devin, let me just kind of talk about that. So everybody's familiar with traditional nuclear with a light water reactor. What is little known is that in the 50s and 60s, there was an alternate nuclear power that was researched, and it's called molten salt nuclear. And it's way safer than light water reactors for a variety of reasons. One, there cannot be a meltdown because the radioactive material is already embedded in a blanket of molten metallic salts. Okay, and so it's already melted down, so to speak. And so if you lose power or something like Fukushima, you cannot have a meltdown. So it's safer that way. It's also safer because the radioactive materials that you use in it are not good for weapons proliferation. And then the third thing that's safer is, based on the technology available today, which is being researched to improve, the long-term nuclear waste from a molten salt reactor is only 17% of the long-term nuclear waste from a traditional light water reactor. And so it's just safer and better in every way. And they're hoping to reduce that 17% down even further with additional research. And so it's exciting. You deal with technological advances. It's exciting to deal with those things.
Oh, that's awesome. That's you're right. I mean, I certainly love to work in on a lot of different technologies, see those inventions and see those improvements. And so definitely makes it for a fun area. And, it sounds like within your practice in general, you get to be able to work or see a lot of those connections, make a lot of those improvements, and otherwise, or take or see that or gratifying result. So with that, so now as we've kind of caught a bit up to where you're at today, what you're doing, and heard and heard the journey, always a great time to transition to the two questions I always ask at the end of each journey. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
The worst business decision I ever made was, let me back up and preface this by saying, when you're making business decisions, who you work with is everything. And when you make a business decision based on other criteria, thinking, oh, well, they bring this, that, or the other to the table, and that really is what I need, and that's really what fits, then you can make mistakes. And so the worst business decision I ever made was connecting with, some others that it just wasn't a fit. And nothing negative to say about those folks. It just wasn't a fit, and it just became apparent fairly readily that, what, let's just move on from this, because it's just not a fit between us. They were not nearly as entrepreneurial as I was. And, I was constantly feeling like they were holding me back, that I was pulling dead weight. They always thought I was out, on a lark and doing crazy things that were very risky in their mind. Right. So it just wasn't a fit that way. And so that was probably the worst one.
No, I think that, sometimes it is hard to be able to gauge that, in the sense that sometimes, as you kind of alluded to, it's not always that they're not bad people. It's not that they're doing anything wrong. They're conducting the business. But, I've worked with, kind of along the same lines of, you'll get into some people that aren't necessarily wired to be entrepreneurs, or they want to do it more the traditional way, or they have a different vision for where you're heading. And then you get into that and you're saying, hey, it doesn't, the directions that we want to head just don't go together, and it will cause continual friction. It will cause, issues, and those will arise. And so it's better when you get in those circumstances to say, hey, it's better to part ways. We can each pursue it how we want to, and it will make it more successful for everybody. So I think that's certainly an understandable mistake to make, but also a great one to learn from. Second question I always ask is, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Make sure you have more of a cushion than you think you need. Odds are you will burn through the cushion faster and further than you think that you will. But the other thing I would say is, start with the end customer in mind. Figure out who your end customer is going to be, and go start lining those people up. Okay? Because at the end of the day, that's who you have to satisfy. And so whatever the business deal is, just figure out where the end customer is going to be, and make sure that through letters of intent or something like that, that you get those relationships in place. And if you do that, you're going to be okay. If you can't get that in place, after a little while, you're just hanging out there.
I like the first point you even hit on, which is, my experience with almost every business, it takes longer and it's more expensive than you're going to anticipate or you plan. And even if you plan conservative, you're still going to take longer and be more expensive than you think, even as a conservative planner. And so I always think that having that cushion and also having the realistic expectation of what the time is, and then saying, I've got to plan even beyond that because it's going to be something that there are going to be variables that I'm just not going to consider. I think that that's definitely a great takeaway as well. Well, as we wrap up, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor in your firm, although most of the time you can't invest in law firms. They want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above. What's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Sure. Why don't I just give you my phone number, area code 801-520-5333, Eric Johnson. Again, 801-520-5333. And Devin, I don't want to turn the tables, but if I can ask you a question,
Sure.
What's some of the fun technology you're working with these days that you can talk about?
Yeah, and probably always walk that line of what's confidential and whatnot. But I mean, I work with a lot of technologies in the augmented reality space, which is just fun. We do it more with some of the clients with industrial applications and training and other things, not necessarily consumer based. Work a ton in wearables, and that's always a fun thing, and do a lot with the medical apparatuses. And then there's just a lot of fun things I do. I mean, I've done everything from food that's with chocolate molding to edibles that are with flower bouquets to boat anchors to I'm trying to think of all the different ones. I'm sure I'm leaving out all the other cool ones of the clients that I work with. But for me, it's one is, I get to work with some of the areas that utilize some of my educational background, but two, I just get to see a lot of cool things that I honestly would have never thought of. Everything across the board, and just makes it kind of exciting to see all the interesting and cool things that people are working on.
That's awesome.
Well, awesome. We'll definitely encourage people to reach out to you, give you a call, and sounds like some great opportunities. And if they're looking for your area of expertise, I definitely encourage them to make sure to connect up there, and also check out your book. And if they're considering going into law school or just looking for a good read. But thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be guests on the podcast, feel free to go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. We'd love to have you. Also, as the listeners, make sure to click subscribe, share, leave us a review, because we want to make sure that everyone finds out about all these awesome episodes. And last but not least, if you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Thank you again, Eric, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks, Devin.